He shook the hand of the man he'd waited 11 months to meet. 30 seconds later, that same man had already forgotten his name. Not because he was rude, not because the moment wasn't important to him, because somewhere in the first 10 seconds, a silent test had already run its course, and he'd failed it without knowing the test existed. Here's the part nobody tells you. Powerful people aren't testing your resume. They're not testing your charm, your degree, or how firm your handshake is. They're running one quiet calculation over and over every time someone new steps into their orbit. Does this person cost me energy or give me energy back? That's it. That's the whole filter. And almost nobody passes it because almost nobody knows it's running. Warriors, welcome back. Today we're not talking about confidence tricks or networking hacks. We're talking about the actual mechanism, the cold, quiet mechanism that decides who gets kept close by powerful people and who gets politely, permanently forgotten. 6 laws, drawn straight from Machiavelli's Read on Human Nature, applied to rooms you're walking into this week. Stay to the end, because the 6th law is the one that changes everything that came before it. Before we start, drop this in the comments. I bring value, not need. Let's begin. Law 1. Stop being interesting. Start being useful. Here's a mistake so common it's almost invisible. Someone meets a person of influence and spends the entire conversation trying to be interesting. They tell a good story. They make a clever joke. They reference something impressive they once did. And it works for about 90 seconds. Then the powerful person's attention moves on, because being interesting was never the test. Interesting is entertainment. Useful is memory. Think about the last time you needed something urgently, a favor, a fix, a piece of information, and someone actually delivered. You don't remember if they were funny. You don't remember what they wore. You remember that when it mattered, they showed up with the answer. That's the entire architecture of being kept close, not charisma. Contribution. Machiavelli understood something brutal about human memory. Gratitude fades, but usefulness compounds. The prince who is merely liked is replaceable the moment someone more likable walks in. The prince who is needed becomes structural. He's no longer a guest in the room. He's part of the foundation. So the practical shift is this. Before you walk into any room with someone influential, stop rehearsing what you'll say. Start asking what you'll solve. What's the unspoken problem sitting in that room that nobody's addressed yet? Who's overworked and hasn't said it out loud? What detail is about to get missed? The person who quietly catches that detail becomes, without announcing anything, the person worth having around. And here's the part that separates the amateurs from the ones who actually rise. Usefulness doesn't need applause to count. In fact, usefulness that goes unnoticed by the room but gets noticed by the one person who matters is the most valuable kind there is. Loud effort gets forgotten by Monday. Quiet precision gets remembered for years. There's a practical filter you can apply immediately. Before walking into any situation where you want to make an impression, stop asking what would make you look good and start asking what the room actually needs right now. Most people never ask that second question because they're too busy rehearsing their own performance. But the ones who consistently get remembered are the ones who quietly shift attention off themselves and onto the real gap sitting unaddressed in front of everyone. And this cuts both ways. Being useful isn't only about doing more, it's about paying closer attention than everyone else in the room. 2 people can put in identical effort, but the one who notices what's actually needed will always outshine the one who's simply busy. Effort without direction gets overlooked. Effort aimed precisely at a real gap gets remembered long after the meeting ends. Drop this in the comments. My value speaks before I do. Law 2. Proof outranks promise. Every single time, there's a specific kind of person that powerful people have learned, through painful repetition, to distrust on sight. The person who talks about what they're going to do, not what they've done. What they're going to do. Every person who has ever built real influence has been burned by promises before. The business partner who talked a big game and vanished when the work started. The hire who interviewed brilliantly and produced nothing. The associate who dropped their way into a room and had nothing behind the name. So by the time you show up, promising your future value, you're not being heard as unique. You're being heard as another instance of a pattern they've already learned to filter out. This is the second law, and it's uncomfortable because it demands patience most people don't have. Build the proof before you ask for the platform. Let the work exist before you talk about the work. A skill practiced in private for 2 years speaks louder in one sentence than 2 hours of confident description ever could. Picture 2 people walking into the same opportunity. One says, "I'm great at this, give me the chance." The other says nothing, but quietly hands over 3 examples of exactly this kind of problem. Already solved, already tested, already real. You already know which one gets trusted with something bigger next time. Not because one is more talented, often they're equally skilled, but one is asking to be believed, and the other has made belief unnecessary. This is slower. It requires doing the work when nobody's watching, refining it in silence, letting it sit until it's actually good, instead of rushing to announce it half-finished. But this is exactly why it works. Everyone can talk about potential. Almost nobody has the discipline to sit quietly with unfinished work until it becomes undeniable. That discipline, more than any single skill, is what powerful people are actually starving to find. There's a hidden benefit to this patience that most people never consider. When you build quietly instead of announcing constantly, you protect yourself from the pressure of living up to a promise you made too early. You give yourself room to actually improve, adjust, and refine without an audience watching every stumble along the way. By the time anyone notices what you've built, it's already tested, already solid, already real, instead of a rough draft performed too soon for an audience that was never obligated to be patient with you. Think about the people you genuinely respect in your own life. Chances are you don't respect them because they told you how good they were. You respect them because you've watched them do something well, consistently, without needing applause for it. That's the exact energy influential people are quietly scanning for. Not confidence in words, but confidence backed by a track record nobody had to take on faith. Law 3. Read the room before you try to own it. Most people walk into a relationship with someone influential the same way they'd walk into a first date, leading with their own story, their goals, their journey, their 5-year plan. It feels natural because that's how normal friendships build. But influential people are not building normal friendships. They're managing an overloaded schedule of people who all want something. And here comes one more person adding to the noise about themselves. The third law inverts this completely. Understand their world with real precision before you attempt to enter it. This means actually doing the unglamorous work. What's the specific pressure this person is under right now? Not 5 years ago when you first admired them from a distance. What decision are they quietly wrestling with? What do they actually value? Versus what you've assumed they value because it would be convenient for your approach. Most people skip this step entirely because it requires patience and a kind of humility, putting your own story down for a while to actually study someone else's. But here's why it's worth it. Being understood is rare, genuinely rare. Most people go their entire professional lives surrounded by others who half listen, waiting for their turn to talk. So when someone shows up who has clearly paid attention, who references something accurate about your actual situation instead of a generic compliment, it registers instantly as different. Trust doesn't take months to build in that moment. It takes seconds, because understanding is so uncommon that it stands out immediately. There's a trap here worth naming directly. This isn't about gathering information to use manipulatively in a single conversation. That kind of calculated approach is usually obvious, and it backfires. It reads as exactly what it is. Real understanding accumulates slowly through repeated small observations, not a single well-researched pitch. The goal isn't to perform insight, it's to actually have it. This kind of attention also changes how you're perceived over time, not just in a single conversation. People begin to notice that you're the one who remembers small details, who follows up on things that actually mattered to them, who doesn't need everything explained twice. That reputation, built slowly through genuine attention rather than clever questions, becomes one of the most valuable things you can carry into any room you enter next. It travels ahead of you, quietly, and opens doors before you even knock. Law 4. Your reputation enters every room before you do. By the time you shake someone's hand for the first time, a version of you has often already arrived. What people say about how you handle pressure, whether you're consistent when nobody's checking, how you treated someone who couldn't do anything for you, these small data points accumulate into a reputation, and reputation is doing half the work of every first impression before a single word is exchanged. This is uncomfortable because it means your worst moment can outweigh years of good ones. One instance of disrespect towards someone perceived as unimportant. One moment of dishonesty that gets repeated as a story. One flash of instability under pressure. These moments travel faster and further than your quiet, consistent competence ever will, because drama is more memorable than discipline. So the fourth law is a discipline of protection. Build a reputation rooted in consistency rather than intensity. Not the person who has one incredible day a month, but the person who brings the same steady reliability, whether it's a high-stakes meeting or an ordinary Tuesday, nobody's watching. Powerful people, whether they say it out loud or not, are constantly scanning for stability, because instability is expensive to be near. It creates risk. It creates drama. It creates work they didn't sign up for. This doesn't mean becoming rigid or emotionless. It means being predictable in the way that matters, predictable in your integrity, even while being unpredictable in your creativity. That combination, steady character with sharp capability, is what actually gets protected and pulled closer over time, long after the flashier personalities have burned through their welcome. Here's the part that stings if you let it sink in. One careless action, one moment of poor judgment, one instance of disrespect towards someone who didn't seem to matter can undo years of careful reputation building in a single afternoon. Reputation grows slowly and breaks fast. And that asymmetry is exactly why it deserves more protection than most people give it. The goal isn't to fake a version of yourself that doesn't exist. It's to make sure how you present yourself actually matches the discipline you're building underneath it, so that no single unguarded moment can undo what took years to earn. Law 5. The moment you stop needing them, they start noticing you. There's an energy that radiates off people who want something too visibly, and influential people develop an almost involuntary radar for it. It's not always conscious. It's a subtle recoil, a slight distancing, when someone's presence starts to feel like a request rather than a contribution. Here's what's actually happening underneath. When you chase, you're broadcasting an imbalance. I need something you have, and I don't have an equivalent to offer back. That imbalance, even when never spoken aloud, changes how you're treated. You go from being a peer worth engaging to being a supplicant worth managing, politely, at arm's length. The fifth law asks you to redirect that same hunger somewhere more productive inward. Instead of spending your energy trying to get someone's attention, spend it building the version of yourself that wouldn't need to ask for it. Sharpen a skill until it's undeniable. Build a body of work that exists independent of anyone's permission. Create momentum in your own direction, with or without the person you once felt you needed. The strange result is that this is exactly when people start noticing you, not because you tried harder to be seen, but because you stopped needing to be. Confidence built from genuine independent progress reads completely differently than confidence performed to mask insecurity. And people who've built real influence can tell the difference almost instantly. They've had a lifetime of practice spotting the difference between someone who's growing and someone who's grasping. This doesn't mean disappearing or playing hard to get as a strategy. Games like that are usually transparent and tend to backfire. It means genuinely redirecting your energy toward building something real, so that your presence, when it does show up, adds rather than asks. There's a difference worth learning to tell apart here. Staying engaged versus constantly reaching out. Staying engaged means continuing to build, continuing to show up consistently, continuing to add value where you genuinely can. Chasing means interrupting someone else's attention just to feel noticed for a moment. One builds respect over time. The other quietly erodes it, transaction by transaction, until your presence starts to feel like a cost instead of a benefit. Law 6. Become the kind of person whose absence would actually be felt. This is the law that ties the previous 5 together, and it's the one most people never reach because it requires a final, uncomfortable shift in identity. Ask yourself honestly, if you disappeared from every room you're currently trying to get into, would anything actually change? Would a problem go unsolved? Would a gap open up that only you were filling? Or would the room simply continue exactly as it did before? Because your presence was decorative rather than structural? Most people spend their entire lives as decoration in rooms they desperately wanted to matter in. They show up, they observe, they admire from a comfortable distance, and they leave the same weight they arrived with. Nothing shifted because of them. Nothing would be missing without them. The people who actually get kept close, who get remembered, called back, trusted with more, they built themselves into something structural, not through one impressive moment, but through a pattern repeated so consistently over time that their absence would create a genuine gap. A problem nobody else catches quite the way they do. A perspective nobody else offers quite as clearly. A reliability nobody else matches quite as consistently. This is what Machiavelli understood at the core of all political survival, and it applies just as precisely to a career, a business relationship, or a friendship with someone whose respect you actually want to earn. Power doesn't protect people because it likes them. It protects people because losing them would cost something real. Your job isn't to be liked enough to be kept around. Your job is to become costly to lose. That's a different kind of work than most advice prepares you for. It's slower, it's quieter, it doesn't photograph well for a highlight reel, but it's the only version of influence that actually holds up over years, instead of evaporating the moment the room gets crowded with someone newer and louder. Notice something about the 5 laws that came before this one. Every single one of them was actually building toward this. Usefulness makes you noticed. Proof makes you trusted. Understanding makes you valued. Reputation makes you safe to keep close. Independence makes you attractive rather than needy. But none of those, on their own, make you irreplaceable. It's the accumulation of all 5, sustained over enough time that they become structural rather than situational, that finally produces the sixth outcome, a person whose absence would leave a visible hole in the room. This is also where most people quietly give up, right before the payoff arrives. They apply one law for a few weeks, don't see instant results, and conclude the whole framework doesn't work. But structural value isn't built on a timeline that rewards impatience. It's built the same way trust is built anywhere, slowly, through repetition, until one day someone realizes they've stopped imagining that room without you in it, bringing it together 6 laws, and they build on each other in order. Become useful before you try to become important. Let proof replace promise. Understand someone's world before you try to enter it. Protect a reputation built on consistency, not intensity. Stop chasing and build the kind of independent momentum that gets noticed without asking. And finally, become someone whose absence would actually be felt, not decorative, but structural. None of this is about manipulation. It's not a trick to extract influence from people who don't want to give it. It's the opposite. It's the slow, disciplined work of becoming genuinely valuable enough that influence gets offered to you. Because keeping you close is simply the smarter move for everyone involved. So here's the shift to actually walk away with. Stop asking, how do I get access to powerful people? Start asking, what would make losing me actually cost them something? That single change in the question you're asking yourself will change the entire trajectory of how you're treated in every room you walk into from here forward. Most people watching this right now will nod along, feel a spark of motivation for a few minutes, and forget nearly all of it by tomorrow. That's not a criticism, it's simply what happens to information that isn't acted on. But a smaller number will actually apply even one of these laws this week. They'll quietly build proof instead of promises. They'll protect a reputation instead of chasing a moment. Over time, without needing to announce any of it, they'll become exactly the kind of person that powerful people instinctively want to keep close. You don't need permission to start, and you don't need an invitation to begin. Every law covered today can be practiced in whatever room you're already standing in, with whatever influence you already have access to. Value isn't reserved for people who've already arrived. It's the exact thing that gets you there in the first place. If you're not sure where to begin, start with whichever law felt the most uncomfortable to hear. That discomfort is usually pointing directly at the gap worth closing. Pick one. Apply it this week. Let the results build from there instead of trying to overhaul everything at once. Power doesn't chase potential. It notices proof. Go build some. If this gave you something real to think about, hit like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe if you haven't. There's more of this coming. I'll see you in the next one.